All right, in this lesson, we're going to look at our render, obviously, our finished render. We're going to do a little bit of editing, perhaps, and then export this out and take it into Photoshop and get our color modes set up right so we can start doing all of our post-processing. So our render here is fully finished. We can go through and look at all of our maps and make sure that all of our maps look fairly correct. Again, the Z depth we're not going to see unless we really bump down our exposure here to something like -15 or -10. And then we start to see that information there. Um, Same with our CPU time. We're not really going to see much there. We will see our albedo, even though this won't be something that we can really use. This is for denoising purposes. Um, we have diffuse direct, diffuse indirect. Again, these two will combine. For the most part, all of these will combine. We have our emission. We see how grainy that is. Specular direct. This one looks pretty smooth. Specular indirect looks a little grainy, so we denoise that one as well. And then we have all of our volumes, which I created because I couldn't figure out why they weren't showing up when I tried to render it, but it was just sort of a glitch. I had to restart. So then we have our denoised, our specular indirect denoised. We have our emission denoised. It looks really nice. And then we have our diffuse indirect denoise that looks really nice as well. Now you can edit these further. If we look at each one of our imagers, our optics imagers, so let's look at the diffuse indirect first. So that's this one here. You can see that I've already tweaked it a little bit with the blend. So basically blend, and if we bump that all the way up, we see it fully denoised. If we bring this down, it's going to blend in the original and bring back some of our detail. So if you're noticing that your denoising is just completely blurring out all of your detail, and you can to blend it in with the original image a little bit. And we can always go back and just check our regular diffuse indirect and see how much of a difference it is. Oops. So I think something around 0.8 is probably good. Now in the Arnold documents, it says if you're denoising a beauty layer or like an RGBA layer, it's good to have this use feature AOVs turned on. What this will basically do is use your normal layer and your albedo layer to further calculate your denoising. But they say if you're just using it on like a component layer, like we are here, they say a better result if you turn it off. Honestly, I don't see a huge difference what's on or off, but since the documents say we're gonna turn that off, and we can come down and look at so it looks like I deleted one somehow there. Well, it looks like for some reason our our images went away. Let's see if we can add them back in there. Yeah, it looks like we can add them back in there. Hopefully we'll be able to edit them still. I don't know what I did there. But anyway, luckily we can add them back in. So let's look at our emission here. We probably won't really need to mess with these very much, but we can if we want. So see, now we're getting a little bit of that graininess back here as we're blending those together. For the emission, I'm just go ahead and bump that one all the way up to 1, and we'll turn off the feature AOV since that's what it says to do in the document again. And then we have the specular indirect we can look at. I'll probably leave that one as it is as well. Maybe blend it a little bit so we can get some detail back in there, and then turn on that use feature AOVs. All right, so we have everything set up here. We're ready to export this out and take it into Photoshop and get our color modes and everything set up properly. So to do that, we're just going to go to File, Save Multi-Layer EXR, and we'll save this in our project directory. So we'll save this as something like Shaman denoised, maybe. And I'm going to leave this open for now, just in case I see something that I may want to change in Photoshop. But we'll leave that open for now. We'll open Photoshop. We're going to go to File, Open. We're going to open our Shaman denoised. So there, before we do this, actually, there is a step that you need to take for Photoshop, because sometimes Photoshop won't open a multi-layered EXR by default. So what you need to do is download a EXR plugin. The one that I usually use is FNord. So if you just look up FNord EXR, it should take you right to the Pro EXR plugin. This is the one that I use just because it's easy. And what you're going to do is just download for Windows. It'll give you a plugin for not just Photoshop, but also After Effects. And then you just take that plugin out and throw it into your plugins directory for whatever application you want to use it in. So just to show you really quick, if we go to local C drive, program files, Adobe, go into Photoshop 2021. That's the one I'm using, plugins, and we see that we have those two Pro EXR plugins right there. So that's all you need to do. And then whenever you open up Photoshop, so what will happen if you don't have this and you open a multi-layered EXR? Chances are it's just going to show one layer of that EXR, and it may be just black. So you may not actually see anything when you open that in Photoshop. But once you get that plugin installed, now you can go into File, Open. We can choose our denoised layer, give that a second to read the file, and there it is with all of our layers in here named for us and everything. So we can take a look at these. Right away, you'll notice that the color is a little off. That's okay. We'll figure that out here in a second. But we'll just go through these and take a look at them, make sure they all look nice. So again, these volume ones I don't really need, so I'm just going to go ahead and trash those that are black. There's our volume direct. There is our volume albedo. That it looks cool, but we're not going to need it, so I'm going to trash that. I'll trash the volume Z. And this volume, these are the same thing. As I click this on and off, you're not going to see a difference, but I'm going to keep both of those because there may be something that we can do in the editing that may bump up those colors a little bit. There is our specular denoised. So that's our specular indirect denoised, and there is our specular direct. So if we zoom in here, we can see the difference between these. So denoised, not denoised. So yeah, got rid of a lot of the grain in there, denoising that layer. There's our specular direct. It's a little noisy, but I think it's going to look fine. I like the detail, the noisy detail in this one. There is our emission. This is the noisy emission. There's our diffuse indirect, our diffuse direct. There is our CPU time. I'll go ahead and talk about what we can do to this to get this to where we can see some details in it. So we'll go to CPU time, select that layer. It will go to image adjustments, exposure. We're going to bump the exposure way down until we start to see some of that detail there, like that. And then what you can do, see if we can find this. It may not be available because we're still in a 32-bit mode. But we could just use levels. So we'll just go to adjustments, levels, and then we start to bring out these levels. So we equalize those levels. Actually, let's see. Enhance brightness, enhance. Somewhere there is a option where we can equalize the tones. Is it brightness contrast? Nope. Because we're going to have to do the same thing to our um, Z depth as well. We can pretty much leave it as it is, which I think we'll do. That's fine because it's got the full range. But this is really neat to look at. Again, for utility purposes, we see where we're spending a little bit more time rendering. So obviously, the waves in the background are taking up a lot more time to render than than our character. And then the reflections, the highlighted areas. So it's just a really interesting um, layer or AOV to look at. There's our albedo. Here is our Z depth. So again, we can go to image adjustments, exposure. We'll bring our exposure down, and then we'll sort of see that information. And we can try maybe using a levels, or let's see what curves we'll do. That enhanced monochromatic looks like it does the trick. Let's see what it does in our levels. Don't want to spend too much time on this, but because it doesn't matter a ton that we get it perfect. But let's look at it in levels and go to options. enhance light dark. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good there. Yeah, so you basically just want to be able to see distinguish the closest object, which is probably going to be his feet here, from the his toes, from furthest away object, which is going to be way back here, and then this is the background. So that's pretty good for our Z depth. Next down here we have our normal map. So it's something we probably won't use in this case, but it's good to have just in case you want to throw an extra light in there and change the mood a little bit. And we may look at how to do that. And then we have our ID map, which we're going to use for masking. So we'll go ahead and turn all of these back on for now. And now we're going to deal with the color. So why doesn't the color look correct in here in terms of, or in comparison to our beauty in our render? So the colors are a lot more vibrant here. That's because if we go back to look at our color management settings, so edit, where that's going to be under Windows, settings, preferences, settings, color management. That's because our rendering space is set to ACES CG. Our view space, view transform, is sRGB. Now, if we look back at our render view here, and we look back at our save image options, we see that apply color management is 8-bit formats only. So it's only going to apply that sRGB color mode if it's an 8-bit format, like a JPEG or PNG or something like that. We just rendered this in a 32-bit format, so it's not applying the color management. Now, if we wanted to do, this is another interesting thing I could bring up. If I wanted to, say, adjust my Z depth in this view, I could come over here to display and mess with my gamma, and then I could apply that gamma, but I just prefer to do it in Photoshop. But so basically what we need to do now in Photoshop is set our color space to be ACES CG so it looks correct. So we'll jump back into Photoshop. We're going to go to image. That's going to be under, let's see, it may not be edit color settings. Yeah, so we're going to change our working space here from sRGB to ACES CG, which is going to be all the way up here at the top. And hit OK. And that should have worked. There's another place. I get confused because there's two different places we can change this setting. So let's go back to, that's what we need to assign profile. So I'm going to go back to our working space and set that back to sRGB where we had it, which is going to be this guy right here. Yeah. So it's not color space, it is assign profile. That's what we need to do. So changing the document profile can affect the appearance of layers. We'll say, okay, continue. And here we're going to change the profile from sRGB to ACES CG. And now we get our proper looking render here. Right. So that's our RGBA mode there. So that's all of our layers combined. We want to be able to edit these on an individual layer. So in order to do that, we're going to turn off our RGBA just so we can see this happening. And we're going to set all of our other layers here, except for our utility layers. And I think I'm going to go ahead and take our utility layers, and I'm just going to group them all together. So we're now just looking at our important layers. So turn off volume direct at the moment too. And I'm just going to go down and change all of these to linear dodge add. So all but the bottom one here, because I don't want it to blend in um, with our group one down there. So that's how we combine them all together, is setting them all to linear dodge add. And now you'll see that if we turn off or turn on our RGB, actually there's a few I don't want. Let's turn off the denoised um, our denoised layers here. It looks like for some reason we did not get our other denoise layers saved in this. So we have our specular indirect denoised. So that's something I need to figure out. Um, so I have them all here. So let me just try saving that again. We could always save them out individually as well. That may be the easiest thing to do at this point, just because I don't want to redo everything that I just did. So yeah, we'll just save them out individually. So I already have my specular indirect denoise. So I need my diffuse indirect denoise, and I need my emission denoise. But just to show you what I was going here with the with adding these all together. Now with everything added together here, we're not really going to see a difference between our RGBA and our combined image. So as I'm toggling that on and off, let me zoom in here a little bit. So I'm toggling that on and off. We don't see any difference. And that's how it should be. If you set your layers up correctly and you've got them all combined and linear dodged added correctly, you shouldn't see a difference between your RGBA and then all of those combined. Now, since we have our specular indirect here, we can go ahead and turn that denoised one on, and we can turn that indirect, the undenoised one off. And now we'll just see that denoised version. Now for these other two that for some reason did not get saved, um, so that's going to be our, let me check that again. So we have our diffuse indirect, right? No, we have our specular indirect denoised. So we need our diffuse, we need our emission denoised, and we need our diffuse indirect denoise. So we can just save these out individually. So I'm just going to select one and say um, save image. And we'll save this as shaman specular spec denoised. So sometimes things like these happen. It's you can't really blame it. It's probably a hiccup somewhere. So you could try resaving the whole thing. I saved that as a wrong one. So do save image, So this one is our, and I don't want to save it as a JPEG. I saved that as a JPEG by accident. So we want to save that as an EXR. So emission denoised, and we're going to save that. In this case, we can just go ahead and type .exr. And then we want to switch that to our specular indirect denoised. Save image. Yeah. And just save that one as an EXR as well. All right, now back in Photoshop, we can bring those in here. So we'll go to File Open, or actually want to do File Place Embedded. And we should be able to just Control Select both of those. So our spec denoised EXR and our emission. Nope, I guess not. So one at a time. Our emission denoised. And it looked like that offset it a little bit. Um, didn't paste it in the right position. So what I'll do, so a trick you can do to fix that, basically what's happening is because of our, because of all this is black, it's just pasting it or placing it right in the center of our document instead of where it should be. It's a weird thing that Photoshop does. So instead of just placing it in our file, what I'll do is we'll go ahead and delete it out of there. What I'll do is just open it. So just go ahead and open both of these. And then instead, I'm going to copy and paste them. Let's first, just so we get our color space right, let's go ahead and assign the right profile to these. We want to assign our aces to both of these. And now I'll just Control A, copy, Control C, or Control A, select all, Control C to copy. And then I'm going to come over here and do Control Shift V to paste that in there, and that'll paste it in place. And I'll do the same thing for this one. So Control A, copy, or Control A, select all, Control C, copy, uh, Control Shift V to paste. And then I'm just going to put these in um, the right place. So this one is emission. So I'm going to put this one right above our emission. And then what I can do to get these names correct is I'll just click that, double click that name, Control C to copy it, double click this name, Control V, and then I'm just going to add in denoised. And then I'm going to do the same thing with this one. This one is our specular or diffuse, right? Did I get that wrong again? I have the specular denoised. Yeah, I need the diffuse denoised. I keep getting that wrong. So let's just do that real quick. Diffuse. That's the one we want. Save image. Kind of use that one, but we'll call this diffuse diff. Jump back to Photoshop, open that guy up. Set the profile. So I'm definitely going about this in a roundabout way. Ideally, you wouldn't have to do this because they would just all save correctly. But in my case, that didn't happen. All right, so we're going to go to Control A, select all, Control C to copy. And I'm going to put this guy right above our diffuse indirect. So Control V, and we'll just copy and paste that name. We're going to set those to linear dodge add. We'll turn off the undenoised one. And there we have it. So looking at this now, we have our nice, beautiful denoised image. Go up here to RGBA and we see the difference between the noisy and the nice and smooth. Now you can denoise every single layer if you want. I noticed that when I denoised every layer, I lost a lot of the detail that I really wanted to keep in. So that's why I just chose to denoise the layers that I wanted to, the most grainy layers. So we will probably notice a little bit of a difference here with our color. It seems like this one is a little bit darker than our one in Maya. Yeah, so just looking at, try to compare these two. Um, so yeah, this one's quite a bit brighter than what we're looking at in Photoshop. But that's just differences in software. We can definitely brighten these up if we want. But this should be the point you're at now. You have everything combined. You can start tweaking some of your layers. You know, if we want to make that blue really pop there, I can always just turn this extra blue layer I have on and set that one to linear dodge add as well. And now we're going to get like an extra saturation of blue that just pops a little bit more. Same thing with like I mentioned earlier how much I like the specular direct guy here. So we could just copy that. I'm just going to hold down Alt and drag open a copy, and we can see that how that makes everything pop a little bit better. We can also try different color modes. So if I set that to normal, let me just throw that one up top so we can see what it looks like unblended. So it looks really cool unblended. So we can try different color modes just to see how that, maybe not linear dodge add. Linear dodge add's going to add them together to look like the original render, but we could play around with different color modes. We can also mask them too, so that divide. So that's what we'll cover in the next lecture is how we can actually get in here and start compositing. We can also masking things out, adding post effects like lens flares and like some grit and dirt and things like that, smoke, fog, depth of field. Um, that's what we'll cover in the next lesson. But in this lesson, we got everything set up correctly. We did go in a roundabout way because we had some issues with how it saved. But we're all set now. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn that guy off for now. And so now we're just going to save out our file. So we'll go to Save As. Shaman. I guess we can go ahead and just save it over our denoised since we got it set up properly. I'm saving it as a PSD this time, not an EXR. So we'll hit save and let that save. And that's it. We're off to the races. We can start doing all of our post-processing to this. We'll cover that in the next lecture. And and we're done rendering. So no more long hours of waiting time for rendering.